Yes, so while painting we first study the reference image. Here we have bearded iris, and because I will start with the stem, I have looked that the stem is dark green in color, but I will start with the light green. I don't think the outline of my drawing is very clear, but you must be having yours, so you first need to wet down the stem. We are doing a wet on wet. First we need to wet our stem. If there is little more water, then you can wait for a second or two so that the water settles down, and wherever the water goes, the paint goes. So be very careful when you are applying this water on the stem. It is a thin area. Next, take sap green color in a very light mix, in a watery consistency. I'm just waiting for the water to settle down. Once the water is settling down, I will take my sap green mix and put it on the wet area of the stem. I'll put one coat of sap green on the stem. It is called underpainting because this will get covered. So I just put in a drop of water in my sap green mix and in my yellow mix also. This yellow mix is at the base of the bud, at the base of the flower. You see that I have not wet down this area. So what I am doing is, my yellow mix is pretty watery. As you can see, I can shift my yellow base from one place to another. That means that the yellow color is not drying out and I am able to shift it. That is why it will not give me any hard line edge. I am looking at the reference image and painting. I am taking time because I am looking at the reference image. I am working on the edges. I am just correcting the edges. I took a tissue in my hand because I saw that there is a spillover from beside the stem on the right side. So what I'm doing is I'm wetting down that area where there is a spillage of color with a damp brush, and I am aggravating the paint which is just outside the border boundary of the stem and lifting it up with my tissue paper. This is part of correction. It is called edge correction. By this time, because the base of the flower it has dried up quite, so I'm wetting it down and I'm extending the water into the petal of the right side, because I'll also do a underpainting over here. I have some pink color in my palette, as you can see. I will be using that. I missed something while doing my line drawing. I am just putting out that shape with a pencil. Now wet the area where you want the paint to be. I am wetting the right side of the petal, right petal. I am taking some watery mix of pink. And I am placing that pink exactly where I have put the water just before. I am using a small brush because the area is not very big which I need to cover. It is a size 1 or 2 brush that I am using. I think I have made it a bit darker. I could have gone a shade lighter, but I wanted to make it prominent for the viewer, so I have gone a bit darker. I am looking at the reference image and then applying the brush stroke. because it is a tricky area. I'm again looking at the reference image. On the left side on the left petal, it is still trickier, so keep looking at the image and make marks as you see. You will be helped if you have drawn your line drawing properly. That is, if you have made the shapes, those are abstract shapes, they don't have a name, but if you have made the shapes inside the flower, you will get that help as to, because you will know where to put the colors, what colors and where to put. So this is a very pale mix of yellow, red, pink, sorry, much paler than what I was using previously. Okay, one more thing is that because the pink on the petal on the right side, it has dried on the top, which you can see has dried. That's why I'm able to paint even keeping my hand from that side, because otherwise if an area is wet, you cannot go on top of it and paint it because it needs to dry out first. So whenever you are painting any painting, just keep in mind that you cannot keep your hand or anything on a painted surface that you have just painted. I am not hurrying up. I am looking at the reference image, which is kept right in front of me in a standing position. Because the base of this flower will go very dark, we can use some pinks as well on it to mark out the shapes which we can see. See, again now I am doing some edge correction. Why I am doing it now is because pink happens to be a very staining color. So I have taken a clean damp brush, not wet, and then I am aggravating the paint which has gone outside the petal, and I am lifting it off with the tissue paper. In a staining paint, if you leave it for a long time, the stain is difficult to be gets very difficult to remove. I'm using Chronacodone Gold over here because this is a very nice color, and this is the second layer that I'm creating. In fact, yeah, the second layer which is I'm creating on this base of the flower. And by the time we put in the darker colors and leave certain spaces for Chronacodone Gold to show up, it will look very nice. Once I'm done with that, I'm washing my brush and removing excess paint on the tissue. I'm looking at the flower, the image, reference image, and then making the shapes accordingly. I have taken a very pale mix of violet and size 1 brush, round. I have been using this round brush all throughout from the start till now. I am putting my strokes carefully. I can go over a very dark area with this very light color, with very light violet, but if I see an area in highlight, I try to avoid doing it right away. I leave the whites as whites. Because it is very pale mix of violet, I can easily paint the darker areas with this pale mix. what I'm creating right now is I'm trying to map it out. That is, with different color strengths of violet, I'm trying to mark out how I will be doing the next layers. Here I am taking a stronger mix of violet and marking it out, so that when I'm doing the next layer after this, I will note that I can put relatively darker color here in this area. That is why I'm putting a stronger mix. This I think is a bit too strong. I can either use a tissue and lift it up, or I can use this at some other place. There is still some dark color in my brush, and I decided to make the veins of the flower which I can see in my reference image. So I am constantly looking at the reference image. It is the mapping out stage which we are in right now. Very crucial. We don't want to go wrong here. Keep looking. What you can see, put it on the paper. Only that you can see, you can put on the paper. This area has dried quite a lot. In fact, it has dried. Because it has dried, I am going over that area. I am going over with a darker strength of violet. This part is called wet on dry because the paint is wet and my paper is dry. It is called wet on dry. And I am moving my brush as per the shape I am seeing. Here I have given it a very dark color because eventually it will go dark. It is slightly lighter than what you can see. It is still showing dark, but it is slightly lighter. You see, the area is surrounding area is dry, and because there was more paint over there, so I am lifting off the more paint and taking it down on the tissue. Otherwise, the paint will settle on the edges of this newly created violet shape and it will not look good, because there is a texture to the flower which can go wrong if I allow that much water to settle down on that part. Now I'm looking at the shapes of the petal and the lines that I need to create for it. I thought that it was not the right line, so because I just put it in, I just took it off with my tissue because the line was damp. So I see that the petal has these longer lines which you can start making on this paper, or if required, you first take a rough sheet of paper. On that you draw a few of these lines with your brush size 1 and then go on to doing it. Right now I am doing a very pale layer. It is kind of very light shade of violet. You can also use pink or very light shade of red also, but be careful, it has to be very light because we'll go over this once it is dry. I'm doing the same thing again. I'm looking at the shape of the reference image of the area I'm going to paint. My focus is at a very small place and the shape I can see, and I am putting it down on the paper. Exactly, trying to replicate what I am seeing. There are areas where you don't need to replicate, but there are areas where you need to get the shape right. That is why I am replicating at this area. It is a blurry area, so observe carefully. Many things are happening in a tiny section over here.